You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today is yet another unique show, a special edition of Women's Media Center Live. The entire program will be given over to two elements. The second is fighting words at the program's end. The first is an exclusive, in-depth, personal conversation with Mary Trump, the likes of which you have not heard in the short interviews and sound bites that she's been permitted on CNN and the other programs. This one not only goes far, far deeper into depth about Donald Trump, but more importantly, about Mary Trump, and especially about Trump's enablers, those who would bring back Trumpism with or without him, those who put us and the Republic in ongoing future danger of authoritarianism. It's also a conversation that gets truly personal. Mary Leah Trump is an American psychologist and author. She's a niece of President Donald J. Trump, and she wrote a 2020 book about him and the family called Too Much and Never Enough. She studied English literature at Tufts University and earned a master's degree in English literature at Columbia, for which she studied the works of William Faulkner and his dysfunctional fictional Compson family. And she holds a Ph.D. in clinical psychology from the Derner Institute of Advanced Psychological Studies at Adelphi University. She worked for a year at the Manhattan Psychiatric Center while writing her Ph.D. research, and she is a contributor to the book Diagnosis Schizophrenia, published by Columbia University Press in 2002. She has also taught graduate courses in developmental psychology, trauma, and psychopathology. Her book details how the author was the anonymous source who revealed Trump family tax returns to the New York Times. The reporting won the 2019 Pulitzer Prize. A legal battle over whether the book could be published was waged in New York's judicial system by the Trump family, with an appellate judge allowing Simon & Schuster to publish the book. The book sold close to 1 million copies on its first day of sales. We'll take a short break and then be back directly with Mary L. Trump. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
The book is Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man by Mary L. Trump, Ph.D. Mary Trump is with us right now. Mary, welcome to the program.
Thanks. It's such an honor to be here for me.
Well, thank you. I have to say right off the get-go that you write really well, which for an English, not only major, but I think you got your master's in English at Columbia. Is not surprising, but academics do not necessarily write very well, and you really do. It's a riveting book, and it's more important now, I think, than it ever was going forward. So, let's start with a familiar question, and then we'll move into questions that you might not have ever been asked before. Given Donald's attention-craving acting out, both domestically with the election and the pandemic, and then internationally as well, what do you think he may try to do between now and the inauguration?
Well, sadly for us, he's going to do whatever he feels is expedient in the moment. There's nothing off the table here. And I think it's important to understand that, but what's even more important is that he could be contained if anybody in the Republican Party bothered. It's their abdication of responsibility that's most troubling, because even though, they can't stop Donald from selling our most closely guarded state secrets, which is very dangerous, they can't stop him from going on Twitter and trying to delegitimize the incoming administration in the way he's doing it. But they could contain him in ways that would make the rest of us safer. They could demand a smooth transition of power. They could demand that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have access to all of the information and materials they need, and they're not doing that. So, the trouble Donald's causing is being magnified exponentially.
Mm-hmm. And his father, your grandfather, had Alzheimer's, a very severe case of Alzheimer's. Is it possible that on top of the sociopathy, that explains some of Donald, too?
It is possible. There's, of course, no way for me to assess that at the moment. But I think what I can say is just, through observing him the way everybody else is observing him, is I don't see that he's very different. It's just the circumstances that are different. The circumstances of being in the Oval Office put him under kind of stress he's never been under before. And now he's in the unique position of having lost in a way he cannot escape from. He can't use his power, influence. He can't use other people's money. He can't cheat, lie, or steal his way out of what was a decisive loss. And I think that is compounding his already dysfunctional behavior.
Yeah. I have to thank you also, because once and for all you put to rest the endless pundit, is he or isn't he brilliant and conniving and a secret genius, or is he just acting out of feral instinct? You put that to rest. He can act cannily, not smart, but cannily, as he did with Woodward when he denied and lied that he knew about the pandemic as early as he did. But that doesn't mean he doesn't live in the moment and act totally out of a visceral, feral, immediate instinct. So thank you. It just now I can turn off the pundits when they rant on about maybe he's a genius. All right. So what you've just said, in a sense, leads me right to my next question, which is more of a thought experiment. Let me ramble for just a minute. So much of this comes down to Donald's childhood, and we do know that the authoritarian patriarchal state has its roots in the family, and God knows his was. But we have to deal with the fact that not only the GOP itself, but 70 million people actually voted for him. And I know we can't answer why people are lured into totalitarianism. I know we can't one-up Hannah Arendt here, but maybe we can untangle one small thread. So, what about the enablers? I completely exempt you from this because you stayed silent as long as you did for fear of them calling you opportunistic, and because, my God, this was your grandmother, this was your aunt. Even if they both did stab you, not just in the back, but in the front. But the enablers are different. And to me, they come in 4 batches, which is very much open to revision. There are the Mitch McConnells and the Lindsey Grahams and the utterly cynical, power-famished politicians who know exactly what they're doing and they don't give a damn. Then there are the fearful hand-wringers the wafflers who will deny that they ever were complicit. And there also is the willfully ignorant base that seems almost, but maybe not totally unconvincible. And at last there are the actual cultists, the small hardcore of the hardcore. Have you, as a thinker and a psychologist, thought about these people and if and how it's possible to heal them?
I've thought about it a great deal because unless we figure out how to change fundamentally the way we approach these people, we educate these people, we are in danger of getting into this kind of situation again.
Uh-huh.
And I think the next time that happens is going to be the last time it happens.
I agree.
Because we are so considerably weakened by the last 4 years, which, of course, is just the culmination of at least a 4-decade-long project on the Republican side to weaken us, to create this extraordinarily large swath of the American electorate that is ignorant, that is susceptible to people like Donald, who is capable and eventually willing to vote against their own self-interests as long as an out group suffers even more than they do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think we're up to 72 million people now who voted for 4 more years of racism, misogyny, cruelty, incompetence, kleptocracy, and on top of that, 4 more years of willful neglect of the American people.
That's right.
In the form of this criminal response to COVID-19.
And who did so at a time when global warming is an immediate clock ticking.
Of course. Yeah. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that people are racist, misogynistic, and they're all for that. That people who have been convinced not to, quote unquote, believe in global warming, which, by the way, doesn't care if you believe in it or not.
Yeah, it's
so that's a trick and a half. But I think, if we, the 4 groups that you just referenced, which I agree that those are categories that we need to deal with, they're also, we can put them in 2 different baskets. Mm-hmm. One is the politicians, right, and that would be the first 2 groups, the craven opportunists and the hand-wringers who are going to wash their hands of all responsibility as soon as political tides turn. And then the other 2 would be the rest of us, the hardcore cultists, and then the people who either they're not paying attention or they're just ignorant enough to be convinced, et cetera. So let's leave the politicians aside, because all we can do with them is convince enough people to stop voting them into office, right?
Right.
We're not changing Mitch McConnell's mind.
No.
All we can do is make sure he's in the minority.
Exactly.
But not in the kind of minority, like he wants to be in the minority that's ruling the rest of us. Like Mitch McConnell wants an apartheid state. But I mean, put him in the minority so he has as little power as possible politically, which would hopefully force him to retire.
Right.
So all we can do is deal with the people kind of in the middle, that 22 to 28% that exists in any society, the hardcore haters, the white supremacists, right, those people who are, for whom it's more important to make other people suffer than it is for them to succeed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's nothing. All we can do, and I think this is one of the purposes of liberal democracy, is contain them, mm-hmm, and hopefully they will once again be contained. Mm-hmm. The problem is the astonishing number of people. I guess we're looking at another 15% who did think that this was okay. Those are the people we really need to deal with, because I think under other circumstances, we might be able to help them see the error of their ways. And I'm sorry if that sounds condescending, but
no, because some of them actually voted for Obama last time around. I mean, it boggles the mind.
Yeah, it's incomprehensible. So, I guess in some ways we need to understand the mechanisms of that, but more importantly, we need to figure out how we got here, and then understand what our options are. So I think what the fundamental problem, or at least the first problem, mm-hmm, and just in the context of the last 4 years, is that from 2016 to 2018, 100% of the federal government represented the worst among us. So because that 22% of the, the hardcore,
Right.
that is the Republican base.
Yeah.
And Republican leadership kowtows to them. So for that 2-year period, they felt emboldened, and their hateful rhetoric sort of metastasized throughout the rest of the Republican Party. The racism and the misogyny became normalized in a way that it really isn't supposed to be. So it was sort of infectious in a way. And we're still dealing with the fallout from that, which is, I think, why so many people still thought it was okay to vote for Donald. So the other thing we need to understand is that in America, you're more likely to divorce your spouse than you are to change political parties. I think in the course of their lifetime, only 16% of Americans change political parties. So this is a deeply entrenched
identity.
thing. And yes. And, the more the parties are, use identity, or I should say the Republicans use identity politics, the more entrenched that divide becomes. So we need to think about this. Okay, so if you're a Republican because you've always been a Republican, you will always be a Republican, you watch Fox News, and you voted for a Republican senator, congressperson, governor, and the guy in the Oval Office. Of course you're going to listen to them. I mean, I'm not letting anybody off the hook for the racism and misogyny.
No, I understand.
In some ways,
that.
that's kind of a separate issue. But if your leaders, if the people you've entrusted with your vote are telling you, wearing a mask makes you weak, there's nothing to worry about vis-a-vis COVID, these people are coming across our border in hordes and they're going to take your jobs away and they're going to rape you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Aren't we sort of, not all of us, of course, but a significant percentage of people in this country are raised to trust and respect their leaders. So what do you do if the only people they're listening to are the people in charge to whom they should be able to take their instructions? So I think it's in some ways it's a top-down solution. We need better leaders.
Yeah, it's the politicians. And there's a lot of flapdoodle going around about the war inside the Republican Party, and maybe we need a new we definitely need a two-party system because, otherwise the Democrats move to the middle and then to the right. So,
always.
But all of the controversy over whether, should we split from it? Have the Trumpists taken over? And I ricochet back and forth between thinking if you don't give him the attention he craves, and you don't give Trumpists, if you don't keep the rock in the air so that they can all crawl out from under it, and you put the rock back down, it might return to normal. Don't give it the air, the oxygen that it needs. Between that position and the position that you just outlined, not that they're mutually exclusive, I might add.
Oh yeah, not at all. And you're right. I think one of the the long-term solution, of course, is education, but we don't have that much time to fix things.
Exactly.
Right, but that is required. So those mechanisms, that infrastructure needs to be put in place, so we don't ever revisit these horrible times again. However, I think simultaneously, these two things will happen, hopefully. One, Donald will be rendered irrelevant, generally speaking. He's not going away, unfortunately. Hopefully he's going to prison, but he's not going away.
Right.
But for the most part, he will be rendered irrelevant on January 20th at 12:01 p.m. in the year 2021. That should have happened already, but again, the Republican Party is complicit with all of this.
Right.
The other thing that's going to happen that I think will go a long way towards helping us get back a significant portion of that 72 million people, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to run an administration that is going to be effective, that's going to help people, that's going to turn down the heat, that's going to engage in rhetoric that we can all deal with,
right,
and that will,
be effective.
disappear for a couple of days at a time, so we don't have to be wound up all the time.
I've said more than once, I'm so tired of news breaking. My floor is littered with breaking news. I don't want news to break anymore over me. Yeah.
No, I'm all for Sleepy Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, give me Sleepy Joe any day, particularly with wide woke Kamala. Oh my God.
That's right.
Wow, that is very interesting and encouraging in its own strange, dark way, because I think that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not just a non-rushing train, although sometimes it feels that way. I have to interrupt here for a very short break, but then we'll be back directly with more Mary Trump. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And now we return to our conversation with Mary Trump. Mary, I noticed that in addition to your degree in clinical psychology, you have a master's in English from Columbia from when you studied Faulkner. Now, I also was a bit of an amateur Faulkner scholar, and I found myself in reading your bio thinking that the Trumps are not only, excuse us, listeners, because we're wandering down English land here, but that the Trumps are not only just the Compsons in terms of a dysfunctional family, but if you go back far enough to great-grandfather Drumpf, the 19th century bar and brothel owner, oh my God, they actually touch on being the Snopeses, but rich. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hadn't really thought about it before, but I was the first Faulkner novel I read was The Sound and the Fury when I was a junior in high school, and in ways in which I could not possibly have understood, I really identified with that book. I've read it more times than I care to admit because it's embarrassing to tell you how many times I've read it. But you're right, absolutely, in Absalom, and in the trilogy. They're all. It just goes back, and I think that's how it works. There are dynastic pretensions and ambitions, and typically people who have those are not the best of us, and their dysfunction and their grasping and their greediness get passed down through generations. There is that through line, I think. I never met my great-grandfather because he died when my grandfather was 12. But, whether it was my grandfather or it was my great-grandfather or great-grandmother, because my grandfather's mother, Elizabeth, was also quite the tough character. There is a through line from all the way back in the late 19th century to now with Donald's own despicable children.
It's
adult children.
And in the book, you write about how your aunts speak of the fact that in terms of an inheritance, he would have left them penniless on the street, and yet they always show up at family holidays. They're hating each other, loathing each other, denouncing each other, but showing up at family holiday, which in a sense is not that different from many families, but it's different with greater wealth and more power, and it just kind of blows you away. You to parse Ishmael in Moby Dick and quoting the Bible, I only am alone escaped to tell. That's you. I have to say this: the quiet courage that you have expressed in your life, literarily. In terms of your professional life, in terms of healthy motherhood, loving motherhood. In terms of coming out as a woman-loving woman in the book, despite the family's denunciation of, I think it was Elton John as a faggot. You know, I mean, and in getting the financial documents to the Times, which made for their Pulitzer Prize, this kind of consistent, quiet assertion of self, principled self, is really remarkable, even among remarkable women, and I've known many of them. How did it come about? You manufactured this out of nowhere.
Well, that's really kind of you. I don't see it as courage, honestly, because writing this book wasn't easy, and but other things were. It took a while for me to get there, but handing over those documents to the New York Times was easy. It was the right thing to do. It made sense to do it. This country was in a terrible situation that was worsening every day. And I felt an obligation. If I could do something, I needed to do it. And that's for writing the book. Although it was hard. I was doing it in the comfort of my own home. I wasn't, out there risking myself every day. And, I think courage, raising Black children in this horribly racist country, I think, fleeing violence in your home to seek refuge in a country of immigrants that,
but
now
it's
reject you.
It's not a comparison game. This each to her own courage. And your dad showed spunk. In that he desperately wanted to fly, in both figuratively and literally, and they killed him literally because they wouldn't let him do it. And you're the bridge. The book's dedicated to him and to your daughter, and you're the bridge between them. And hopefully, she will be able to do whatever she wants, however she wants it. But you spun out of yourself like a spider with fine silk. The fabric to do all of these things. And I do think that's a remarkable story, and I think you should own it.
Well, again, I really do appreciate that. And I think that, hardship tempered with other things can help. It can be character building. And there were a couple of things in my early life that were positive things that helped me be really grounded in a way I may not otherwise have been in this crazy family of mine. I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, which, although it was right next door to Jamaica Estates, was a very different place. It literally may as well have been a different planet. Jamaica Estates, where my grandparents lived and where my dad and aunts and uncles grew up, was 100% white, 100% Christian, and not very wealthy, but solidly upper middle class.
Mm-hmm.
Jamaica, on the other hand, was working class, lower middle class, and predominantly Black when I was growing up there. I took the subway to school, walking down Hillside Avenue, and that was much more my life than I wasn't rich,
Right,
I did not live that. I did not live that life. The other thing is, I went to sailing camp on Cape Cod Bay, which was very privileged, but that wasn't the experience I had. It was, I'm in nature. I'm in this beautiful place. I'm by the sea. I'm doing all of these other things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I spent my summers playing in the parking lots behind the buildings.
Sure.
In Jamaica,
Sure.
So those two things really, really help shape me.
Well, however it happened and whatever contributed to it, it's a remarkable saga. The book is called Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. It is more important now than ever, especially now between the election and the inauguration, and especially thereafter, because the detritus that he has left in his wake we will have to deal with for a long time to come. And I think that this is one of the we don't have in-depth personal, much less familial studies, much less by a clinical psychologist, of Mussolini, of Hitler, of Pol Pot. we do of this, and I don't mean the comparison to be exact, but it is proximate, and that's scary enough, quite sufficient. And next time around, it could be exact. So thank you, Mary. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for the book. I hope there's more books to come, and I wish for you a fulfilling, loving, happy life with your daughter, and more books to be written, frankly, because you're such a good writer.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. It's been wonderful talking to you.
After that, it's time for our final break, after which I'll return with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Accountability can be a fighting word. Trump and Trumpism have been the result of years, maybe decades, of preparation. You can track it way back to Joe McCarthy and McCarthyism in the 1950s. Some count to the beginning of Ronald Reagan's term of office, the genial manner, the B-movie star smile, the hardline politics. Some trace it to Newt Gingrich and his so-called contract with America, his disgust that there was way too much civility and too little difference between the major parties. He longed to hammer home stark partisanship with no room for a compromising middle. And he did. Undeniably, since the debut of the Tea Party, followed by Sarah Palin, it's been around for a while. She, lest we forget, backed by all those well-meaning Republicans now part of the Lincoln Project, possibly doing penance. But however far back you go, there's been a strain of authoritarianism, even of fascism, which has masqueraded as American populism. It's always been reliably sexist, racist, anti-immigrant, anti-lesbian, and in general highly reluctant to share any form of largesse with ordinary people, also international, opting instead to concentrate wealth and restrict privilege on itself. The characters may have changed. People forget that at one point the enemy was the filthy Irish mix, or the dirty Italian wops, or the disgusting wetback Mexicans, and consistently, always with too many epithets to list here, the blacks and the Jews. It's usually been about jobs being stolen, supposedly, a lie, from white, less educated working-class men. It's invariably mixed up with identity of self and with religiosity, and it's always rooted in fear of change. In those particulars, the recent and let's hope non-recurring wave has been no different. What's especially interesting about this particular strain is its accompanying pronounced self-pitying grievance factor, so evident in Trump's tweets, statements, and world outlook, one which articulates the grievance feelings of his target base. Still, we've been here before. In Germany's democratic Weimar Republic, in the years between World War I and World War II, the Germans had a name for this, Dolchstoßer legend. It translates as stab-in-the-back myth. It was a key element in the propaganda promulgated by German generals after World War I. According to this absolutely false narrative, seized on by many right-wing extremists, including Hitler, the Kaiser's armies didn't lose the so-called Great War on the battlefield. They were betrayed by civilian politicians. The German army, although in retreat in the fall of 1918, could have kept up the fight, according to this story, but was undercut by scheming defeatists who settled on an armistice in November. That self-serving lie should have been obvious, and, in fact, it was. The strategic situation was disastrous, the German armies were being royally routed, and the civilian populace was approaching starvation and more than ready to surrender. Everybody knew this, but the stab-in-the-back myth wasn't meant to be understandable. It was meant to be understood. That difference is crucial. It puffed up a nation's humiliated pride and played into that nation's worst prejudices. As an aside, we should note that whenever a segment of society has a genuine grievance and finally does struggle to name it out loud, that is met with cries of exasperated dismissal for crying victimization or for playing the victim. Mass propaganda knows that its audience is primed at any given moment to believe the extreme, even absurd lie, no matter how ridiculous. In fact, the more ridiculous and the bigger the lie, the better, as Hitler wrote and as Joseph Goebbels reputedly said. Look, I assume that Trump, who has already said flat out he's never going to concede the election, will simultaneously pivot and announce his 2024 race to reclaim the presidency on the very inauguration day of President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, trying to steal the thunder and press coverage. We know that since major funders deserted him, he already has built a massive grassroots fundraising effort, and it's underway, getting people to buy his snake oil twittering and televangelism, getting them to send in their nickels and dimes so that he'll have plenty for his legal fees and also for a political platform from which to wield what power he can. But there is something we could do that would definitely cramp his future plans, and those who enabled and collaborated with him. We could bring enormous pressure to bear for his being charged, prosecuted, and hopefully convicted of criminal behavior. I understand that President-elect Biden's position on his not intending to prosecute Trump once Trump's out of office is, in fact, a wise decision. Not only because there's no time for it, given all the work that needs to be done, but because it leaves the Justice Department properly independent of the White House to prosecute or not, as it should be, and as it was until Trump decided to claim it as his own personal law firm. Nor would any U.S. Attorney General worth her salt take a job under those manipulative circumstances to begin with. Tempting as it might be to call for the next AG to investigate Trump and, if warranted, prosecute him for potential federal crimes, that would be counterproductive. It would inflame his base, play into his stab-in-the-back myth, appear blatantly partisan, and look vindictive. As to whether Trump pardons himself or not, whether he can or not, that's a question for constitutional lawyers to chase each other's tails about. This much we know. Even if he is able to pardon himself or arranges things so that Pence pardons him, such pardons have no power to stop state charges, such as those being readied now in New York State. These range from financial crimes and election law violations to public corruption, partisan coercion, and staggeringly blatant obstruction of justice. By the way, although some of these crimes date from before his tenure as president, it is nowhere written that winning a federal election immunizes a candidate from consequences for earlier crimes. Then there's the revenge factor. It's truly difficult to put firmly aside the realization that should those forces ever hold power again, frankly, they will have no compulsions about the moral niceties of revenge. Nevertheless, I've looked long and hard at the revenge factor to keep it out of this. I've also looked long and hard at the dangers of our turning into the kind of autocratic state that Trump wanted us to become, wherein law enforcement authorities become politically weaponized by the reigning party. I believe strongly, too, that we urgently need to mount serious legal and political systemic reforms, the lack of which, an assumed dependence on norms of voluntary behavior like making public your tax returns and health records, permitted Trump to get away with as much as he could without ever being stopped. But the truth is that electoral defeat is not enough of a recompense. But Nixon's having resigned in disgrace, in effect admitting that he had been culpable, was a fine subtlety lost on most Americans, who simply saw him get off to live in cushy retirement. And they learned that lesson. What lesson now will be learned by the neo-Nazis, the Proud Boys on standby, the KKK? What will be learned by the Koch brothers? What will be the takeaways of the lesser minions, the Giulianis, the Stones, the Flynns, the Stephen Millers? Had Ford not pardoned Nixon, an example, however painful, would have been set. The president is not above the law. Just that clear. The founders of this country knew that. They would have recognized it. They would have understood it. Leave Ford and today out of it and think about them. That's why they structured this republic the way they did. This must not be allowed to repeat itself. Not out of partisanship, not from revenge, not from turnabout being fair play, from simple justice. Simple because accountability is required. Simple since letting a president off because he's president is all the more absurd. Precisely because he's president, he should be held all the more accountable. This does not solve the questions that swarm like flies around the dung heap of fascism. It doesn't address the fascistic mind, although we strongly suspect that the authoritarian state has its roots in the authoritarian family, and that both are patriarchal. But it does give us a glimpse into just why all the good Germans were who they were. I refuse to apologize any longer for the simile with the Nazis, because we cannot wait for this to reach that point. Without some kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission or structure, or at the absolute minimum, unless the Southern District of New York and other state attorneys general prosecute Trump under the law, these past 4 years will eventually repeat themselves, and in the near future, and with a vengeance. And this much we also know. Even more central is this bitterly tautological reality. If Trump is not held accountable for alleged and even openly admitted crimes, then he literally was above the law. And for that, we will be accountable. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter at WMC Live. And remember to tag us at Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at The Robin Morgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor Regina K. Scully, WMC president and co-executive producer of this program Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.